The Marxist theory of ideology proposes that whenever there is an exploitative mode of production prevailing in a given society, the ideology that emerges from that society tends to have contradictions because it is quite hard to justify, to rationally justify the contradictions in the relationships of power that give rise to exploitation and that give rise to essentially the men being eaten by other men. So I could give you examples about contradictory ideologies in slave-based societies or in feudal societies, but since we live in capitalism, and I have recently talked about a marvelous piece of ideology by Jordan Peterson where he motivates us to only focus on ourselves instead of trying to pursue system-wide changes that can potentially change not only our lives but a lot of people's lives. I've decided to make this video with the intention of proving how Jordan Peterson actually demonstrates that Marx was right, at least in this one thing. So you might recall from my last video that Jordan Peterson's main thesis is essentially that whenever we have a problem in our lives, pretty much always we are the cause of it, we are to blame for it, and that we shouldn't look for systemic causes of our problems, especially for social problems that we as individuals have to face and that we share, and that we should pretty much just focus on ourselves and focus on an endless path to individual perfection that we are, of course, never going to finish, but the intention pretty much is not to change anything. It's just for us to stay, conform, obey, and don't really get to profound changes. And I've already criticized this argument in my last video. I'm not going to do it extensively here, but what I want to show is that Jordan Peterson himself doesn't believe that this is the right way of changing the world. And to prove this, I'm going to look at the claims he has made with respect to the social justice warriors who he considers to be ruling the world and censoring free speech and all of these things that, of course, don't really make any sense. But let's look at at his claims when it comes to social justice warriors to see where the contradiction might lie.
Equity trumps everything. Equality trumps everything. And that's not good. To put it simply, that is not good. And so people need to wake up and see what's happening. And they need to start watching what their children are being taught. That the new policies of the Ontario Teachers Federation, as I said, I've got the acronym wrong, those should be scrapped. I would tell people, do not send your children to public schools.
It's time for people to wake up.
You know, I've talked to the Conservatives, the leadership, many of the people who ran for the leadership federally. I've talked to the provincial Conservatives in Ontario. The provincial Conservatives were too afraid to have me come and talk to their caucus. They think I'm too, because, you know, their theory, I guess this is Patrick Brown's strategy, is if they just shut the hell up and hide in the corner, Kathleen Wynne will flame out and they'll win the election. It's like, well, maybe and maybe not.
But that's no strategy of courage.
Conservative types, even the liberals, the classic liberals, have to get out there and say, look, what's happening on the radical end of the political spectrum, that is not good.
We need to do something about it.
The Conservatives are afraid that they will be targeted as individuals, mobbed by the social justice warriors online, and taken out.
So I would say we should face them down before they continue to wreak the kind of havoc that they're already wreaking on our society.
So should chase every single liberal, every single provincial liberal should be taken out of the Ontario legislation in the next election. That would be a good outcome. If you're not happy with the kind of policies that your company is putting in place, or the bureaucracy that you work in, or your government, or any of those things, if you're not happy about it, and you wait,
the probability that you'll become more unhappy is extraordinarily high.
Say something early on, you're taking a risk. But if you say something and you don't apologize and you hold your damn position, you can chase them back. That's been my experience. You don't apologize, and you don't soften what you have to say.
So here we can see how, assuming that he actually believes that nonsense, that social justice warriors are the main threat to Western civilization, that he actually thinks that in order to make changes in our society, in order to dethrone those that seem to be in power and that seem to be making things, creating problems in people's lives that we don't think that should be created, regardless of whether you think that it's the social justice warriors or some other people, but that the main way of doing this is to actually go ahead and challenge these people, not only at a rational argumentational level, but an institutional level, at a legal level, to try to prevent people from accepting their ideology, and not just to focus on yourself and what you could be doing better, but to actually go ahead and try to convince other people and try to make other people understand that what, in the case of Jordan Peterson, social justice warriors want to make people believe is wrong. So then, if Jordan Peterson claims that he is not the problem, that the social justice warriors are the problem, and that they actually are positing a threat to society that we collectively should try to go ahead and challenge, then why in Prager University he's saying that, oh no, you should be looking at yourself and what you could be doing better in your life, and if other people are doing things that are bad, oh, you cannot change them, you can only change yourself. Don't question the system, don't try to change the system, because it's probably you who has a problem with other people. You see, this is exactly what I was trying to oppose in that video. This passive conformity, this cheap attempt to convince people to not do anything about the injustices that happen in our world just because they could be doing things in their life better. Of course, we all could be doing things in our lives better, and yet the things that are wrong outside of our lives are still wrong, and we should still try to change them. In fact, a lot of the things that are wrong in our lives are product of the things that are wrong outside. So why shouldn't we focus on them? Why should we just focus on criticizing the social justice warriors and challenging them, but not on challenging the capitalist system, the capitalist mode of production that, for example, produced the worldwide financial crisis in 2008 that brought many people to the brinks of, that actually brought down many people and that made a lot of people unemployed, they lost their homes, they went into extreme poverty and so on and so forth. Why? Why shouldn't we try to do things about it, but we should instead challenge the social justice warriors? This is a contradiction. And you know what? It actually, even though it seems as a contradiction, in reality, the deep truth about it is that it actually is not a contradiction, because Jordan Peterson's message was never just to passively conform. It was just to passively conform to what he thinks you should passively conform, and to get changes done whenever it comes to defending the interests of the people that already are ruling our capitalist global system. So even though we might face it as a contradiction, because playing his game, it is actually a contradiction, the truth about it is that in reality it was never meant to be an absolute. It was never meant to be, oh, you should always focus on yourself. It was actually meant to be, you should only focus on yourself when it comes to making true, deep changes in our mode of production. But you should, of course, be outraged and try to change things when it comes to, just challenging a group of students that are offended by certain things that Jordan Peterson said. And the truth, the proof that Jordan Peterson is not, that the Marxists don't control the world and are trying to censor everything, is that Jordan Peterson has been so successful for the past years. How can we believe his narrative, his ideology, even as he is today a person that is more influential than pretty much every other Marxist out there? How can we even believe it? It's so ridiculous. And this is the kinds of things that we should challenge. We should challenge people. First of all, we should challenge the system in which we live. And second, we should challenge the ideologues that are trying to make us responsible for the problems that are created by the system in which we live. And the ones that, even as they're telling us that we are the problem, are putting the blame on other people, not on themselves, thereby being contradictory even with their own principles that, of course, were never intended to be absolute and were just meant to apply to the people that find ideologically convenient. So the profound irony about all of this is that in the end, Jordan Peterson, whilst trying to challenge and to defeat intellectually the Marxists, has actually proven them right when he contradicts himself in his cheap attempt to justify the unjustifiable.